In the last episode, we were discussing who this mysterious director of the so-called NGO, Wildlife Conservation and Prevention Organization is. A guy by the name of Sem Soda, so mysterious that even his employee, a monkey toilet cleaner, their sole spokesman, denies his existence.
Who is Soda?
But isn't he the director of this so-called NGO? Perhaps back in his office, he wears a mask and a cape to disguise his ID. Who knows? And we also touched upon briefly how anatomically impossible monsters were brewing up at this organization's facilities. Are you ready to learn more? Let's roll. So following my pointing out an impossible X-ray, their so-called vet with 10 years experience in primate medicine posted on Ailes injury back in June. Sem Soda has blocked my access to his NGO's Facebook page.
Access denied.
What is he trying to hide? Are there any more X-rays that are dodgy there? I couldn't tell as I was only asked to look at baby Ailes injury by a concerned viewer then, and I didn't have time to look at others. But thanks to many concerned viewers, I now have access to the few X-rays that the NGO has posted on their Facebook page from the very beginning to some more recent ones. And so there's Tom. And you could tell his right wrist was injured. My guess is it was just a simple sprain. As he was still moving about without much problem, I would have just left him well alone. Injuries like this usually heal within a week or less in the wild. But there's no drama this way. So here's what this NGO did. They took him in. And what's more, despite it being an injury in the right wrist, they had decided to put a rod into its right arm instead. Hold on, it's like treating a sprain of one's ankle. And the doc suggests the patient to have a rod rammed up its femur instead.
That's standard procedure at WCPO.
It doesn't make sense, does it?
Trust us, we have the vet.
Anyway, this NGO alleged that such an operation was performed on the 26th of December, 2020. And here's the post-operative X-ray they post to convince us of such. My dear viewers, can you spot anything that's unusual, or simply impossible being shown here? Okay, if you haven't figured it out yet, I'll tell you. First of all, there is indeed a fracture shown here, just above the elbow joint. And it's an old fracture, with new bone, or callus forming around the fracture already. As the bony fragments are less opaque, these suggest this fracture is not healing properly. Two metal rods, we call them rush nails in orthopedics, have been inserted into the upper arm, to connect the fractured bones together. So what we are seeing here is an injury not of Tom's. It belongs to someone else, another primate. And to stabilize the fracture and prevent the nails from rocking around, a plaster of Paris cast was put in place to prevent the elbow from moving at all. What's more, if you haven't noticed already, there's the shadow of the heart. So just like Ailes' X-ray, we have been looking at the left arm again. And Tom's left arm is totally alright as we know. So whose X-ray is this? or perhaps more accurately, as we will see later, whose X-rays are they? And how did Sem Soda get hold of them? I'll give you a clue now. Who's the nurse among the many cameramen there, working at the children's hospital in Siem Reap?
Huh?
Now, let's return to this X-ray, allegedly of Tom, a pigtailed macaque again. If you look carefully, there are at least two more things on this X-ray that don't make any sense at all. No, oh. Let's look at the shoulder girdle. There it is. Which consists of the scapula at the back, and the clavicle at the front. Now, can you see what's anatomically impossible there? Another clue, there's the vertebral column, which lies in the midline of the body. Yap. Not only do the shoulder blade and collarbone cross the midline to the opposite side, they are huge, almost as big as half the chest itself. And if that's not odd enough, if you look closely, something actually lies in the midline too. Yes, there's another humerus, or the upper arm bone right in front of the chest. Lastly, if you take a step back, the sizes of the head, upper limb, and chest, relative to one another just don't make any sense at all. There are many other abnormalities on this X-ray, but they are a bit too technical to be dealt with in a short video. What I have pointed out so far will suffice. And if we were to trust this X-ray, Tom should look something like this. Instead of 2 upper limbs, he should have 3. With the left one appeared foreshortened, as it is attached to the left shoulder girdle starting across the midline from the right. And this should also be significantly bigger than normal, if the X-ray is correct. But we all know Tom isn't a freak. So why is the X-ray so different from reality? And that the vet had operated on the wrong arm again, if there had been indeed a fracture above the left elbow, which we know Tom didn't have. How the hell did it happen? Just to recap. Tom was supposedly taken in to fix a broken right wrist. But the X-ray shows that they had rammed 2 nails up the left arm for a non-healing fracture above the elbow instead. Stranger still, a primate that has 3 upper limbs too. Incredible, isn't it? The only way that can explain the appearance of this X-ray is that it is a composite one. Someone has, somehow got hold of a few X-rays of a monkey. Like Sochin and Song did in their NGO scam back in 2019. And we know how money can go a long way in Cambodia. One only needs to bribe a technician manning the X-ray machine, easy job. Getting an X-ray is one thing. But bribing one's way into an operating theater to stage something is impossible. Too many people and professionals are involved for that. But an X-ray is no good in itself. And to turn those X-rays into ones depicting some kind of orthopedic procedures that had been carried out,
once fluoroscopy has been used to mark out the trajectory of the pins,
to convince viewers that there is indeed a new NGO out there,
they are placed through the skin, aiming to get
different from the fake one in 2019, and is staffed by professionals with proper medical facilities such as an operating theater. They need to work on those X-rays. They need to marry it with the real ones depicting so. Let's start with one I found of a vervet monkey on the internet. And one of a child with a pin for a fractured arm bone, humerus. Let's play with them around, and see what we can get. Bingo! It's pretty convincing already, isn't it? And if I play around them on a simple image editing program, I get even more convincing result. and it takes less than a minute. And it looks pretty convincing to a layman already. And more, I know where the heart lies and I pay attention to the correct, relative proportion of each body part in this cooked-up X-ray. And so here I have a story.
We were called by the authority last Sunday to help a monkey with a broken left arm. An X-ray shows that the poor monkey has a fracture in its left humerus, and so our vet with 10 years experience in primate medicine decided that, despite knowing macaques' excellent ability to heal many injuries and fractures in the wild, he proceeded to fix the fracture with an operation. For fuck's sake, please donate.
But of course, their so-called vet isn't as bright, and he hasn't a clue about anatomy, and so we end up with a monster on this X-ray. So we are actually looking at 3 separate X-rays here. One of a kid with a fracture just above the elbow. One of a macaque on its front, with its face to the side. And one of a child from the side, a lateral X-ray. And that person didn't do a proper job at it all putting them together.
Oh bugger.
Another drawback pulling off a scam using X-rays like this, is that their narrative is pretty much limited by what X-rays they have in hand. So for Ale, their so-called vet had to come up with rubbish like this. Sometimes contradictory to say the least.
Although we could not see the broken bone because of the calcification process building new tissue around the bone.
Mate, if you can't see a fracture on an X-ray, it's healed.
Once inside we discovered the bone was not healing properly.
How? A non-healing fracture is easier to spot on X-rays. That's why we use them to monitor a fracture's progress.
Therefore all the new bone was removed and a metal rod was placed in her arm to support the bone.
Honestly, why would a vet operate on a fracture that has almost all healed by itself already? And the X-ray they used is another cooked-up one. The absence of a shoulder blade, the appearance of the ribs, and the odd location of the esophagus all indicate that we are looking at 3 X-rays put together and manipulated digitally. And look at the teeth, curving up at the back. That's a clear indication someone has used a warp tool in an image editing software to manipulate the images. There is again a plaster of Paris cast around the operated arm. The nails are in not just for a fracture, but for holding together osteomyelitic bones as well. Poor kid, to whom this X-ray belongs to, isn't going to do very well with a non-healing fracture, which is also infected as well. His or her stay in the pediatric orthopedic ward is going to be one long and rough ride too. Back to Ale again. And to make their narrative appear convincing, they even made an incision on Ale's elbow and sewed it up again. And badly too. To pretend an operation had indeed taken place. Totally cruel and abusive. And by the way, where is the plaster cast and the 2 nails that should be sticking out through the skin? They aren't very bright as scammers, are they? Ale shouldn't have been taken in the first place had they really had a vet who knows anything about primates. My bad, it is my misunderstanding. It is for creating content for videos, and getting donations too. Well done, Sem. Your scam ought to be plain sailing. There is also another rescue with a long-tailed that has got a fracture too. This time in the thigh bone, or femur. And surgery had been promptly performed to reduce and stabilize the fracture. And there's the victim, a long-tailed. And there's the fracture on the X-ray. Honestly, this kind of clean, transverse fracture in one of the strongest bone in the body doesn't occur in nature, and definitely not after a bite. It is just another digitally manipulated image. If there is indeed such a fracture there in this poor monkey's thigh, it wouldn't be able to stand up. And there should be a gross visible deformity too, like a foreshortening of the thigh. But you could see there's no misalignment from the norm at all there. Unlike what the X-ray shows. This is one single fracture that can only be fixed with an operation, with an intramedullary nail. But I gather they didn't have any X-ray of such in their possession, and so we just have to take their words that this monkey had an open reduction and internal fixation operation. But no X-ray to prove that it indeed had taken place. I suppose we will never get to see this NGO's facilities and meet its vet with allegedly 10 years experience in primate medicine at all. Oh, well, we should feel lucky that we do still get a glimpse of all his captive animals from time to time, housed in small cages inside a derelict room. In the next episode, we will find out who this vet is, and we will connect the dots together to see who the shills are among the cheerleaders in his so-called NGO. They are the one who benefit the most from such a scam.
I'm not feeling
Stay
so
tuned.
confident in this non-for-profit that I want to give money to.
No, yeah, it definitely makes sense, and it's good that you do your research on it as well.